Hello everyone, welcome to Learn with Pranab. In this video, I have discussed about brain and its parts along with the structure of neuron. In this video, I have also discussed about PNS, that is peripheral nervous system, and CNS, that is central nervous system. We will start our discussion with cerebellum. Observe the location of the cerebellum in the brain. The cerebellum integrates the information that it receives from the other motor areas of the brain and coordinate the movements to make them fluid and precise. The cerebellum also helps to maintain posture and balance by controlling muscle tone. So it controls the posture and balance. When you practice a movement repeatedly to develop your technique in playing a sport or a musical instrument, you are modifying certain neural pathways in your cerebellum. Unlike in the cortex, these pathways are not cross-connected, so a lesion on one side of the cerebellum causes a problem on the same side of the body. So cerebellum's basic function is to balance and to control the movement of muscle tone. Next is hippocampus. Observe the location of hippocampus in brain. The hippocampus is an old part of the cortex and appeared in the first mammals. It is the gateway for information that is to be memorized. The hippocampus relays this information to the cortex for long-term storage and retrieves it when it has to be recalled. The many connections between the hippocampus and all of the sensory areas of the cortex enable us to encode the complete context associated with an event. It also imparts an emotional tinge to our memories. Now observe the location of amygdala. This almond-shaped structure located near the hippocampus plays a crucial role in learning, in memory, and most of all in the regulation of emotions. The amygdala are especially involved in fear and aggressive reactions. When the amygdala detects certain potentially stimuli, they alert other brain structures to coordinate the body's fight or flight response. So we can say that amygdala is the fear center or fear controlling center of our brain. Rats whose amygdala have been surgically destroyed will calmly throw themselves into the jaws of a cat. We can say that if we don't have amygdala, we will become fearless and also susceptible to danger. Observe the location of thalamus in the brain. The thalamus is something like the brain's mixing console. It relays visual, auditory, taste, and touch information to the cortex and determines which pieces of this information reach consciousness. The thalamus is involved in exchanges of motor signals between the cortex, the basal ganglia, and the cerebellum. It is also involved in pain and attentiveness. In short, the thalamus in a sense keeps each part of the brain aware of what the other parts are doing. So we can say that all the information that we gather are first processed in thalamus, like auditory information, visual information, taste information. When you think about your favorite food, your mouth starts watering. So it's because of the thalamus. Observe the location of basal ganglia. The basal ganglia are located on either side of the thalamus. They play an important role in initiating and controlling movements and modulating sensations. Parkinson's disease, with its rigidity and tremors, is caused by a malfunction of the neurons that make connections with the basal ganglia. It is also this involuntary motor activity that lets us talk with our hands without even realizing it. Observe the location of basal ganglia with respect to thalamus. It can stay in either side of the thalamus. The next is hypothalamus. Observe the location of hypothalamus. The hypothalamus ensures the balance of influencing our hunger, emotions, in particular through the pituitary gland, which is located just below it. The hypothalamus controls this gland, which produces hormone that regulates such things as sexual maturation, maternal behavior, and responses to stress. The hypothalamus also manages the body's internal clock, which affects sleep and body temperature. I think it's clear. The next is cortex. This is the part of the brain that makes human beings so different from other animal species. About 75% of the 100 billion neurons in a human brain are located in the few millimeters of gray matter of the cortex. In proportion to their body weight, human beings have the largest cortex of any vertebrate. The reason is that in addition to the areas that control sensory and motor functions, the human cortex also controls uniquely human functions such as language, imagination, planning, reasoning, and consciousness. In addition to its four external lobes, the cortex also contains a fifth internal lobe, the limbic lobe, which is heavily involved in memory and emotions. I think you are curious to know about four external lobes. Let's discuss about the four external lobes. Scientists identify four major lobes on the surface of each hemisphere of the human brain. Now we will discuss about frontal lobe. Frontal lobes. When you plan your day, think about your upcoming vacation, or defend an idea convincingly, your two frontal lobes are very active. In addition to reasoning and planning, your frontal lobes modulate your emotions and are involved in what makes up your personality. Your voluntary body movements are also initiated in the frontal lobes, but in the portion farther back. Lastly, a small region in your left frontal lobe is very important because it lets you convert your thoughts into words. So that's all about frontal lobes. Next is parietal lobes. A good meal places heavy demands on your parietal lobes, especially their forward regions, which handle your sensory perceptions, not only taste but also touch, temperature, and pain. Your parietal lobes are also take in auditory and visual signals and associate them with your memories in order to give them meaning. Without your parietal lobes, you would not be able to understand spoken or written language. Then we have the next lobe, that is occipital lobe. The main job of your occipital lobes is to decode visual information, so they are active right now. As you read these lines, form, color, and movements are all analyzed by your occipital lobes. By associating these visual perception with remembered images, this part of your brain, also known as the visual cortex, lets you recognize and identify objects. Then is temporal lobes. When you listen to music, your temporal lobes are hard at work because they are the part of the brain that lets you distinguish the volume and frequency of sounds. The upper portion of your temporal lobes are also the part of the brain that lets you understand the meaning of the lyrics. The temporal lobes are also involved in forming memories. The right is involved in visual memory and the left is involved in verbal memory. So it's all about four lobes. These four lobes are the part of cortex. We have different types of nervous systems like peripheral nervous system, central nervous system. One is autonomic nervous system. So this structure, that is cingulate gyrus, helps the autonomic nervous system to adjust blood pressure, heart rate, pupil size, and other psychosomatic responses that accompany emotional reactions. In this video, we will discuss about all these systems. Then we have corpus callosum. Observe the location of corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is a thick band of nerve fibers containing millions and millions of axons. Axon is a part of neuron, through which homologous and non-homologous regions of the brain's two hemispheres communicate with each other. As we know, we have two hemispheres of our brain, left and right. So this left and right hemisphere communicate through this corpus callosum. Then we have brainstem. This is the oldest part of the brain, sometimes known as the reptilian brain. As we are evolved being, we evolved from lower animals. Now we are higher animal. At the base of the brainstem, the medulla oblongata manages basic survival functions such as regulating heart rate, respiration and blood pressure. The medulla also controls reflexes such as vomiting. Vomiting is a reflex action. Swallowing is also a reflex action, and sneezing is also a reflex action. We will discuss about reflex action later. Higher up the brainstem, the pons and the midbrain connect various brain structures involved in motor control. 10 of the 12 cranial nerves. Cranial nerves mean the nerves which originate from the cranium. Originate here and control eye and facial movements. The brainstem also contains the reticular formation which manages sleep and attentiveness and enables us to concentrate in the midst of the distraction. You can see the different parts of brainstem. So this one is medulla oblongata, then we have pons, they are also the part of brainstem, then we have reticular formation, then we have midbrain. So these are all the part of the brainstem, or also known as reptilian brain. Then we have spinal cord. The spinal cord is the extension of the medulla into the spinal column. See, observe the spinal cord, it's actually the extension of medulla or medulla oblongata. The spinal cord, you just observe the medulla and the spinal cord, it's the extension of medulla. The spinal cord relays in sensory messages from the body up to the brain and motor commands from the brain down to the muscles. So all the command from the brain is passed through the spinal cord. The spinal cord also contains certain reflex pathways, we will discuss about reflex pathways later, that operate independently of the brain, such as the one that makes your knee jerk when the doctor taps it with a mallet. So we can say that the spinal cord carries information from brain to all the muscles, that is to all the peripheral nervous system. Now you will observe the sagittal view of the brain. So observe the part of the brain in sagittal view. That is, if you cut the brain longitudinally or LS, longitudinal section is also known as sagittal section. So if we cut our brain longitudinally, how it will look? Observe the part of the forebrain. It has two parts, telencephalon and diencephalon. Telencephalon contains the listed parts, and diencephalon contains the listed parts like thalamus, hypothalamus, pineal gland, which is also known as epiphysis. Observe the midbrain here. It has its own listed parts. It is also known as mesencephalon. Then we have hindbrain, which is also known as rhombencephalon. In rhombencephalon we have two types. Metencephalon, it contains cerebellum and pons, and myelencephalon, which contains medulla oblongata. Let's talk about the layers of the brain. Layer of protection is the skull, and above skull you can see the skin also, which act as armor shielding the brain from blows. Next come the meninges, three membranes that surround the brain to keep it from being damaged by contact with the inside of the skull. It is these membranes that become infected when someone gets meningitis, and it is because the meninges are in direct contact with the brain that meningitis is so dangerous. For even more protection, the brain are bathed in spinal fluid, or also called CSP. This fluid circulates through a series of communicating cavities called ventricles. In addition to cushioning the blows, it also reduces the pressure at the base of the brain by causing the nerve tissue to float. It is secreted by the choroid plexus in the upper ventricles and absorbed by the venous system at the base of the brain. It carries away toxic waste and also moves hormones between widely separated parts of the brain. Then we have the nervous system. The brain is something like the body's control tower. It must be kept quickly informed of the body's need and of the resources available in the environment to satisfy them. For this purpose, the brain relies on a vast network of wiring distributed throughout the body, the nerves. Together with the brain and the spinal cord, the nerves constitute the nervous system. To distinguish the control centers from the information pathways, we divide the nervous system into two subsystems. Let's see them. Central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system consists of the brain and its natural extension, the spinal cord, which runs through the center of the spinal column. The spinal column together with the skull provides a veritable suite of armor for the precious central nervous system. Observe the central nervous system here. The brain and spinal cord together makes the central nervous system. Then we have peripheral nervous system, the nerves, some of which gather information while others transmit orders. The facial nerves enter and leave the brain directly through the skull. Other nerves reach the brain via the spinal cord. The nerves in the peripheral nervous system are divided into two categories. Let's see the peripheral nervous system. You can see the peripheral nervous system here, all the nerves of the body, and we have central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, and peripheral nervous system, all the nerves of the body. Now we will see the two categories of peripheral nervous system, the somatic nervous system and the autonomic system. These nerves participate in the organism's relationship with its external environment. They send information to the brain from the body's various sensory detectors. These nerves also enable us to respond to these stimuli by moving through our environment. Then we have autonomic nervous system. These nerves are more involved in regulating vital internal functions. They help to maintain internal equilibrium by coordinating such activities as digestion, respiration, blood circulation, excretion, and the secretion of hormones. The autonomic nervous system in turn is divided into two categories. We will see the two categories of autonomic nervous system also. We will briefly discuss about two autonomic nervous system. There is sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic nervous system, it dilates the bronchi and the pupils, accelerates heart rate and increases perspiration and arterial blood pressure. That is, it orchestrates the flight and or flight response. And parasympathetic nervous system, it deaccelerates all the things. When whatever was dilated, accelerated or increased by the sympathetic nervous system is contracted, deaccelerated or decreased by the parasympathetic nervous system. It only increases the digestive function and the sexual appetite. Anatomy of the neuron. Here the neuron will describe itself. You can see all the parts of the neuron like axon terminal, synapses, dendrites, soma, nucleus. All these parts are associated with neuron. So now neuron will describe its all parts. You just watch the video till end and enjoy the video. Thank you.